Welcome back to the Mina Show featuring Lenny, playoff football recap edition. We're going to talk about the championship games ahead of Pro Bowl week. We're going to talk about some of these coaching hires. There have been 3 more head coaches hired since my last recording. Brian Schottenheimer, Pete Carroll, Liam Coen. But first, Domonique, I wanted to make a little announcement. I didn't actually announce this. I just teased it on the show last week. But tickets are on sale for a live podcast I am doing in Los Angeles, where I live, next Monday, February 3rd, before I leave for New Orleans. It is 100% for wildfire relief. The folks at Omaha Productions are actually matching your ticket. So it's a $50 ticket, but it's actually going to be $100 going. We've already lined up a bunch of guests. It's going to be sort of like a crossover pod. I'm having my friends Greg Rosenthal and Jordan Rodriguez from NFL Daily, and then my buddies Chris Ryan and Andy Greenwald from The Watch. There's probably one more guest that I'm going to announce soon. But yeah, I mean, Domonique, I've just been kind of, here in Los Angeles, talked a little bit about how the wildfires have affected me, but more importantly, people I know and people I don't know. It's just been awful here. So I'm just excited to have this opportunity to do a little something. So if you're in Los Angeles, please come. I would love to see you. There's also going to be merch. You're going to have limited edition Mina Show hats and tumblers. We're going to hang out a little bit after, maybe take some pictures. So please come.
It's definitely the most fun way to do some good. Like you could just donate some money elsewhere, but you're going to get a show on top of it. Sounds like fun.
We've done a few live shows over the years. Quite a few, actually.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. They're all very great. We have some good live show stories that maybe you can share at this live show, a couple of the funny live show stories.
Yeah, some interesting memories for sure. So anyways, minapodlive.com. There are still tickets available. Come if you're in Los Angeles, or if you know somebody in Los Angeles, please share that with them. All right, let's talk about these coaching hires. I guess we can go kind of chronologically backwards and start with Brian Schottenheimer. It's hard because they're doing their press conferences now to remember the order in which we can talk about these press conferences. I actually thought Brian Schottenheimer was fine at his press conference. Jerry Jones went on felt like a 30-minute tangent where he basically was like,
just dissing him. Just
nobody believes in this man. It's the riskiest move of my career. He's been thought of as a lifelong assistant.
He said he had baggage. He was like, you might think it's a lot of baggage. Like, what are you doing? It's just the worst way possible. I guess you're lowering expectations, so it's going to be easy for Brian Schottenheimer to outreach those expectations. But it was just another incident in the list of like Jerry Jones seemingly being out of it and just making really weird decisions.
Well, he said it was the biggest risk of his career or whatever because he hadn't been a head coach, which is obviously ridiculous. Head coaches all the time are hired having not been head coaches. The reason why it's a risk, or the reason why I think I haven't taken the temperature of Cowboys Nation, but I'm guessing it's not super positive, is just because Brian Schottenheimer has really never been seen as like one of the offensive minds in the NFL. He's also been connected to this Cowboys offense, which felt really stale this year. Now, if I had to give, I guess, some optimism or give him the benefit of the doubt, he didn't call plays in this offense. And I will say, Domonique, before he left Seattle, the offense was humming for a second with Russell Wilson. You remember that let Russ cook. That was Brian Schottenheimer, but then it kind of hit a wall when defenses started playing him with those 2 high shells and they couldn't run the ball as well. At his press conference, I thought it was really interesting. He got weirdly specific about offense. Did you guys watch this clip?
Yeah.
I don't mean weirdly. I guess I mean it's unusual for he said, I want motion, I want cut splits, I want to run the ball. I was like, oh, this is okay. Like, is he perhaps signaling that there's going to be some sort of schematic shift? Because I do think that would be welcome in Dallas.
So in Dallas, Jerry is often talking about how he's not responding to the public pressure while obviously very much not capitulating to it, but speaking to it at all times. And he did it in his press conference. It's interesting that Brian Schottenheimer seemingly did the same thing. Is he went down the laundry list of criticisms of antiquated offenses and said all the things that we would potentially say about the issue with the offense. So I guess if you're looking for some reason to have confidence, that would give you confidence. It doesn't give me much confidence. I think the most optimistic part about it to me is nobody really knows how to hire a coach. So maybe you got it right this time just because it doesn't seem like it makes sense. But calling it risky while his last name is Schottenheimer
That
is
is, yeah,
like
also
it's the most distinct last name, the
yeah,
most distinctly football last name in the history of the league. It's like your dad was a head coach for multiple teams. Saying it's risky to hire a dude
good
whose
point.
dad was a head coach, who's been an NFL assistant for more than 2 decades, calling it risky is just bananas to
Yeah,
me.
no, that's a really good point. Yeah, he is. It's. I mean, there's obviously like half the NFL teams have
Yeah,
nepotism on their coaching staffs, and sometimes it works out. Shanahan,
yeah.
but yeah, it just the whole Jerry, the way he positioned it was obviously pretty ridiculous. I do like the idea of his like mom spaghetti is like they say I don't use motion. I'm gonna use so much motion.
Yeah,
One
he's
other thing I
priming
will
for it.
say, not to be like Pollyannish about this, but just to try to give a little bit of hope for Cowboys fans, he does reportedly have a really good relationship with Dak Prescott. So I do like that because whatever this offense looks like, you certainly want to work hand in hand with the quarterback. And they're going to, and by the way, Dak Prescott is going to be the Dallas Cowboys quarterback for a long time because they're going to have to restructure his contract to pay Micah Parsons. It's fine. It's not, it's not going to put them in cap hell forever. But that is an important, like, this is not a team that, like, we're going to talk about the Raiders in a second, where quarterback is a big question mark. They know who their quarterback is. So having a head coach who can work with him is probably good.
Maybe they can end the drought, the air quote drought that they're in. I'm sure you saw Stephen Jones is whatever drought. They're such a fun organization, man. They just give us so much. Not if you root for them. Like I'd be incredibly frustrated if I
Yeah, I
actually
was gonna
cared
say,
about
yeah,
their
I'd be really
results.
pretty upset
But
actually
as
about that.
for us, they give me something to talk about every
Look,
week, even
they're
when they're not in the playoffs.
they're perfect take field because they're never gonna, maybe never, but they're not. They're good enough to be relevant and
Hmm.
to like for people to get mad when they're losing games, as opposed to like just a really bad team. All right, so the Raiders, Pete Carroll is their head coach. Yeah, I okay. So there's a lot I like about this. I'll start here. You and I, every time we talk about these coaching hires, we're like, well, we don't know what kind of leader he
Right.
is. We don't know if he can, like, be a CEO. We know Pete Carroll can do those things. Pete Carroll is proven. He has a track record of winning. He is beloved by players, by the way. I don't know if you saw Marshawn Lynch was at the press conference.
Hmm.
Um, the ultimate like endorsement, like character endorsement. If Marshawn Lynch likes someone, I'm like, all right, yeah. probably a good human being. I also feel like obviously he has the recent history, or not that recent, but of shepherding a young quarterback and Russell Wilson. I'm sure Raiders fans looking at that and being like, maybe that could be us. We'll find a guy in the third round. And he's a very good defensive coach. He is one of the best DBs coaches of his generation. Pass defense is a big problem with the Raiders. Those are all the things I liked about it. Do you want to pick nits, or were you largely like feeling good about this one?
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders feel like an expansion team in some ways. And I'm sorry, I don't mean that as disrespectfully as it sounds, but it does feel like a team that hasn't really settled into what they want to be and where they want to go and how they want to be run. So I think somebody like Pete Carroll like feels like a good person to have when you are trying to sort these things out. And you have the influence of Tom Brady, and then you have the ownership influence, and they're in a newish city in Vegas, so like it all feels kind of brand new and unstable a bit. So I like it from that perspective. If you believe that Pete Carroll is going to turn this into a championship contender, that's where I think you might be mistaken. So I could be wrong, but it feels like there's more issues on this roster than
Right.
one off season, unless you manage to nail like some you find Jaden Daniels like that can happen.
I think that's my biggest question about this hire is kind of timeline, right? And
Yeah,
because, Pete Carroll's 73, at least. He might be a little older. One imagines he's not going to be doing this for that much longer. And then we look at the Raiders, and like you said, this doesn't seem like a team that's built to compete now. So I guess, what I think the best case scenario for Las Vegas here, obviously the best case scenario is that they, like you said, find a Jane Daniels or whatever. But what you really hope is that he can just kind of set them on the right direction.
Yeah.
So it feels like, and I would say that too, like watching all these teams in the playoffs, and I've talked about their commonalities. I think with the Raiders, yes, they're going to draft a young quarterback, I imagine. Although they could also be a free agency target for like Sam Darnold. Russell Wilson was mentioned, but you want to see him focus on building out the roster right now, so that if it is that quarterback or the next one, it's a better spot than it's been. I would like to see also the defense really like there's talent on that side of the ball. Obviously, they had some injuries this year, but I think he has the ability and opportunity here to really improve that pass defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that most of all is like this is how we're going to do things. Like I think he
Yeah,
needs to like establish this is the way that champions practice. This is the way that an organization is run. And I think that he'll go a long way to make sure that they understand that. And then maybe they figure out some sort of like transition coach that doesn't feel like a firing. I'm sure he's not thinking about that right now, but yeah, to your point, like this is not a 10-year assignment, I wouldn't think.
Pete Carroll's like, I will only serve one semester, one oh god, term.
Term,
Yeah, geez,
there
my
it
brain.
is.
I just said semester. One term as head coach of the Las Vegas
Yeah,
Raiders.
that's what they all say.
Okay. Uh, Liam Coen, speaking of
Oh,
giggles, did you guys play that clip on TV this
oh,
morning of him
three
saying
times in
it's
the two
tough?
hour.
It's a tough
Oh,
watch. So for those who missed it, Liam Coen, well, we actually talked about Liam Coen on the podcast last week, when it seemed like he was going back to the Bucs, and we were laughing about the Jags, I guess choosing Balky, and then for those who have been missed the news cycle, they fired Balky. Cohen said, "All right, actually, I still do want to be a head coach," which in some ways, incredible power play. I know Bucks fans are very mad at him and how he went about it. And I'm sympathetic to that. But I'm also like, there's so few head coaching jobs. I mean, look what happened with Bobby Slowick, for example, right? Like he was a hot head coaching candidate. Now he's out of a job. I do not begrudge Liam Cohen from striking while the iron is hot and taking what I actually also think is a decent head coaching job in Jacksonville. So Jags fans are overjoyed. Bucks fans are furious. Liam Cohen has his press conference this week, and it's fine. It's a little awkward. The only part that was really bad was when he tried to do a Duval chant
yeah,
here, or
yeah,
whatever you want
yeah,
to call that. That was hard to watch.
yeah. That was very uncomfortable. Yeah. I assume that maybe everyone is now trying to do the Dan Campbell, where you have a funny introductory press conference, but then you turn out to be an awesome coach. But I guess Dan Campbell's funny introductory press conference was consistent with like we just thought it was funny because we hadn't been exposed to him very
Yeah,
much, and then we're like, oh. And it felt to us like, oh, this man just talking crazy, saying crazy stuff. Like, no, this is the problem with Liam Cohen thing is like, all right, if this is really who you are, if this is
right.
a
Like
look
an
at,
introduction to him.
this
Yeah,
is
I
the
know.
introduction is
Who
like,
knows?
we're meeting an awkward guy.
Yeah, Nick Sirianni is the most famous,
Duval.
terrible. I God, jeez, please don't say it ever. It's. I mean, I am sympathetic to Liam Cohen because I am the kind of person who, anytime I try to say like a slang term or a new word, I immediately regret it or just. I tried to do bet recently, which is, by the way,
Oh,
outdated. I don't think people even
yeah.
consider saying that anymore. And I was like, all right, bet, and immediately, like my whole body crumpled and
But you
rejected
nailed
it.
it. Like it sounded natural.
Didn't sound natural when I said it. Okay, real quick on the hire before we move on here. I liked this hire. Um, you know, we'll see how Liam is in terms of managing the locker room, the whole head coaching,
I love
game
it.
management. I'm inclined to think, based on things I've heard him say, that he's going to be good at game management, or at least trust people to do it, which is more important, arguably. But mostly, I liked it, Domonique, because he has such a track record now with quarterback friendly offenses, including the one he just called in Tampa. Um, Two things jumped out to me this year watching them. I mean, there's a lot, but Baker Mayfield, he got him to play so fastest time throw of his career. And when you go back to Trevor Lawrence's best year, the year he was looking like one of the best, like the dudes, 2022, he had the third lowest time to throw of any quarterback in football. Like that's the way you want him to play as well. And then the evolution of the Bucs run game this year, you know, it was, yes, they had a great offensive line and they've drafted well and that matters. Yeah, but I also think watching them conceptually, he evolved the run game, you know, going from more of a zone to a gap scheme. And um, I thought the way they use skill players to block also was really good in a way that was suited to the personnel. So, and that's also, again, quarterback friendly, good run game. So I think just if mission one is like, let's try to get Trevor Lawrence back looking like Trevor Lawrence, this seems like a good start to me.
Yeah, and I think like you pointed out in there, some things that I do think is important is being adaptable, being able to change
Yeah.
to what suits your personnel and what suits situations. As as we try to like assess like the most important traits of teams that have extended success. I think like the most recent two dynasties that we've seen, the Patriots and the Chiefs, the thing that stands out in like the salary cap era, and I know like the salary cap era, I guess like 93 on, but I guess it really doesn't kick in until later. But the dynasties that are in modern football, the ones that sustain, find a new way to play. And even the ones who don't, like teams that are consistently good, but you wouldn't even consider them a dynasty, you see that they're consistently good, but they're never good in the same way. So like that's encouraging about the Liam Coen hiring. And I also think that like, man, the league must not think much of Baker Mayfield, because if you make him play well, they give you a head coaching job. They're just like,
It's
hey,
happened a few times
hey,
now.
show us one good year with Bake. You
I
come
know.
on over.
It's
Give you
true.
a big contract.
I really think it's because he had like a career turnaround and they saw the lows. There's always going to be
Yeah.
this perception of him now as like a quarterback who can play well in the right circumstances. And so you are going to look at the coach in that way, fairly or not, because I do think Baker himself deserves a ton of credit for what he did this year. But yeah, it's very true. And but look at like that's the other thing. Like I think people think Canales worked out, right? So you look at
Yeah,
that, you got the case study, you're like, why not? Let's get the next Canales, the guy who followed him and called an even more efficient offense. With, I mean, yeah. So we'll see how it goes. Can, can you do a Duval to send us out, or
do a proper Duval, or
what's the
I
right way to
think
do?
that they.
I always do it like the woman from the video, the take it to the limit video.
All right, let's see
No, I'm
it.
not gonna do it. I'm gonna do it.
Oh, why not? I mean, I think the funny thing that I realized later in the day, after I laughed at him all day, was like, that's gonna stick to him, and no matter what happens this season, it's coming up again. So like that, they might change it. What if he starts off 5-0? Everyone's gonna be doing Zuva.
oh, oh my god! All right, let's start with the AFC Championship game. And let's do. I'll do the winner, you do the woof, and then we'll do the reverse for the opposite one. I I really don't like being the person who's like coaches, but I did feel watching this the experience, ability, and innovativeness of the Chiefs coaching staff just had its fingerprints all over this game. That I mean, both sides of the ball, right? I think defensively, well, you and I have talked about this, obviously. C. Spagnuolo's ability to call pressure at the right moment and the right kinds of pressures was how they closed out this game. It's almost like Domonique, though, like, I'm trying to think of maybe it's just because he does blitz and simulate pressure also so much that it's very vivid to watch, but it feels like he sequences pressures. It's like watching Kyle Shanahan on
Yeah,
offense, where it's like, oh, he's setting them up to think this is coming and then this is coming, and they're thinking it's going to be zero again, but there's a guy dropping into the windows. And I just feel like this season he's like painting his masterpiece right now.
agreed. And Spags has been a reminder to the point that you were making, is that defense can be attacking. And I don't mean attacking and like blitzing. I mean forcing, because we often think about defense and it's kind of in the name. It's like reactionary. It's like, all right, we do this in so many of our schemes and coverages. when you and I talk coverages, we talk about a lot of how, especially in zones, that the concepts require you to do different things depending on what someone does. So like it's a very defensive mindset to be like that. But to your point, it's like, no, we can show them stuff too that they have to adjust for and prepare for. And through the course of this game, I think with you, I've been talking for a few weeks now about how it seems like Steve saved something for the end of the game and
Yeah.
or for the pivotal down, and then he brings it out. So I've been watching these games, and the funny thing is I've been watching these games trying to guess. It's like, all right, this is the drive. And in this game, there was a drive before that last drive when he pulled out the blitzes, where it was a pivotal third down. It might have been like 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7. I was like, yep, I know it. It's coming right now. And he didn't do it. And I think that he, knowing when you can do it or when you should, because based on the last game, he broke out the blitz. It was before like the last drive. And so I assumed that he would do it again, and he didn't. And then in this one, he called a blitz on 3rd down, and the Bills were ready and called a screen. The defense ran it down and stopped it. And then he came back with another blitz, but the look was so different that I think that the Bills didn't expect it to be a blitz because they called a screen. So like
you think Josh Allen thought everybody was going to drop out there on that 4th and 5? So we're talking about.
I don't think that he thought that it was going to be a blitz.
Corners were coming.
Yeah.
Even though they were in like such a
I don't think that it was
formation that and
yeah, I mean, so they went 4-by-1. You go empty 4-by-1. The point of that is to force the defense to declare. They did 4-by-1. They did the motion. The reaction wasn't a man reaction. The defense didn't adjust very much at all. And I'm thinking that he's assuming off of that, and also based on how they protected it, like that the right tackle kicked way out. And it's just a big gap with 2 guys running through. So like, I don't know. With the crowd noise, it's hard to communicate and get the protections. But we spent a lot of time looking at that play, and I don't even think Steve Spagnuolo thought it was going to work out as well as it did on that particular snap.
Straight
through. Unblocked without going zero. Like that's unheard of.
I thought in the moment that he thought they were just going to all come again, and that they had like a little mesh pattern that he would be able to hit. I think it was Cooper coming across from right to left, just watching his helmet, because he never looks at the orbit. It was a big Twitter battle yesterday about the simple question of whether or not he could hit the orbit motion. Who knew such a thing would make people so angry? But in any case, I don't think that was ever his thought process. I think he thought that he would be able to get the ball out really quickly to Cooper. But yeah, the point is not we'll talk about the Bills in a second. I think just Spagnuolo's the way he game plans sequences is so unbelievable. But I say coaches because I wanted to hit the other side too. The Bills played a ton of man coverage in this one, way more than they usually do. Like way more. I think
it wasn't by choice.
Yeah, right. And and they also lost their starting their best corner, Christian Benford, which was massive, because then the Chiefs said, cool, we're just going to go 11 personnel all game long, right? And they were going to run the ball pretty easily, and we're going to go after Kyrie Lim. But the other thing I thought, just again, they're so good at attacking man coverage, and it's really schemed up. Like it's been the case all season. It's obviously not new with Andy Reid, but I really feel like he has found the right roles for all of his receivers to win that way. It's not Travis Kelce, which is why, of course, it's not a big Travis Kelce game if you're going to play a ton of man coverage. And he is so good at setting them up to succeed. Like we talk so much about play callers and how they set up quarterbacks. We're just talking about Liam Coen. But I was watching this thinking, and he doesn't have to do stuff for Patrick. He has to find ways to get his skill players in position. And I thought this was a really good showcase for this, particularly with Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, this falls in the category of like where you can put the pressure. And this team very clearly, like, you don't want to put a bunch of pressure on the tackles. You don't have receivers that are great, so you don't want to like put a bunch of pressure on them. You put the pressure on Patrick Mahomes, which is a great place to be. Is like the game plan doesn't have to be too complicated because you can trust him to sort the situation well, to buy time, run when he has to, find the open receivers, and deliver accurate balls. I think your point is a good one. It's a second, third level point, is like you strategize for what your players do well in certain situations. And I think that you find the plays and the routes that your receivers run well. But also the point of their game plan is, I don't want to make it sound like it was incredibly simple, because it wasn't, but I guess that's the sign of a good game plan. Is I figured it out while watching the game. Normally I have to go back and watch the tape and like, oh, this is what they were trying to do. While watching the game, I was like, all right, they discovered, or they know this is a zone team. They're going to RPO them to sleep
So
and
many
force them.
RPOs.
And it was like, all right, we're going
like,
to RPO you until you play man. Because as I'm sure people who listen to this know, that the tough thing about RPO is if you have zone responsibility, like you either come up to stop the run or you go back. If you're a man responsibility, then you go where your man goes.
Yeah.
And so you could care less about the RPO. But this team that plays heavy zone, you're like, all right, we are going to exploit the out of this zone and RPO you, which, to your point, the Bills played more man than they ever have. It wasn't because they wanted to. It's because if they would have played zone, then the Chiefs would have just taken, I was going to say 5 yards a pop, but somehow Juju Smith-Schuster is breaking off 40-yard plays because the RPO attacked the middle of the field and he caught the ball running. And so, yeah, to your point, like the execution matters, but that's just more to the coaching. And they were like, this is what we're going to do until you stop it. All right, you stopped it, and you got corners. So, like, they don't have corners. I don't want to say draft. They don't have corners that are like man specialists. And so you're down to your backup non-man specialist corner. It's a tough look.
I know. He was, Kyrie Elam too, when he was drafted, was thought of as like a man shutdown corner potentially. And then Benford just outplayed him dramatically. That was a massive, massive loss in this game. Who knows if it would have been a different result, obviously, but I think that loss was sort of and then the Chiefs' game plan, it sort of set off a chain of events that led to what we saw from one of the best performances of the Chiefs offense all year long in terms of their efficiency. All right, well, I'm very excited to get to the Chiefs offense versus the Eagles defense, because as you were talking about all the compromise, the ways that the Bills defense is compromised, I was already thinking about like, ooh, I don't know, but the Eagles can handle that. The Eagles can handle these RPOs. The Eagles can play, we'll get to that, but we want to hit the Bills here. And by the way, later this week, my podcast, I am not previewing the Pro Bowl. We're going to go through all the playoff losers and what they have to do. So I'll be able to spin it forward a little bit for the Bills and Commanders on that podcast.
What is your favorite thing about the Pro Bowl? Just is there a particular game or just like hanging out around all the players?
It's 100% hanging out because I'm there, gonna be there for NFL Live, and then after NFL Live, the other people on my show do the Pro Bowl, and I'm not part of it, which is actually really fun because I just get to walk around and chat it up.
When's the last time you were recognized by somebody? Because I've noticed it's been a while. I've been around you where it's been like somebody really, like a really respected football person will come over and want to talk to you. And I think the Pro Bowl is probably a time when, but I guess you're probably not surprised by it anymore, right?
No, I have mentioned this story before, but this situation at the Pro Bowl, to undercut your example a little bit, was when I was walking around, was when Justin Tucker came up and introduced himself to me, and then immediately said, "I've seen all your tweets about him." So that one comes to mind. Anyways, okay.
Sorry.
I'm not talking about myself. Let's talk about the Bills here, and because this is you got the woof for this.
Yeah.
I think was the thing
my
that
woof
struck you here?
Yeah, my woof is a bit of a cop out to allow us to talk about everything, but the fans, I think the Bills fans, it really sucks for them to be in this situation. And I think the game, it feels silly to say the game would have been different if they were at home, since they lost at home last year, but they beat them at home this year. I do think that that's something that that matters a lot in these situations, particularly with the blitzes that they're going to send from Spagnuolo, and particularly with adjustments that Patrick Mahomes and stuff could make. Is we talk about home field advantage generally about sports, and I don't think it matters in other sports nearly as much as it does in football to be able to communicate. But generally, it's the fans not being able to have that impact, and also the fans dealing with this disappointment again. I don't know where you want to start with things that went wrong.
No, the fans is a great place to start because this did feel like their year. And by the way, I think you make a really important point as we talk about what the Bills need to do. They got to get the 1 seed next year. I was thinking that watching this as well. Like if this was in Buffalo, I really feel like it would have made a massive difference. Yeah. Two obviously very evenly matched teams. This came down to the end. There's a million reasons why the Bills lost. Losing Benford was big. I think they don't have like a dude on offense or defense. That jumped out to me. Like they don't have a Chris Jones who's kind of the queen on the chessboard. Because we talked the whole time about Steve Spagnuolo, but the first half, Chris Jones was either getting doubled or just destroying worlds on every play.
Right.
And then offensively, the Chiefs don't have like a bucket getter guy either. Kelsey's sort of that in some situations. But I did feel like I was watching, I was like, man, it's very similar to what I've said about like the Packers, for example. You do wish that the Bills had like a guy who like just like your gotta have it guy. And I think the hope is maybe Keon Coleman will be that, but I did feel like that was felt. And then finally with the quarterback, which is the other reason why they lost in some, and I say that not because he's why they lost, but this was not one of his better games. It just wasn't. And I think if I had to like sum up how I felt about his performance, it was actually, it reminded me in some ways of how I felt about Lamar's performance, which isn't to say they were comparable necessarily, but they were both guys who didn't play their best games of the season. They were both uneven. They both made uncharacteristic mistakes. These are guys who did not turn the ball over at all during the regular season. Lamar and Josh. That's why fan bases were at each other's throats. And then in the playoffs, Lamar turns it over twice. Josh should have turned it over 2 times on the first drive. I know it doesn't matter, whatever.
Yeah.
And then he made some really good throws. I mean, that throw to Mac Hollins was unbelievable, right? But I think it's unbelievable. I come away, Domonique, from both of those performances, which were again down, thinking, man, it is so hard to do what Patrick Mahomes does, which is not make those not play worse football in the postseason. Like, I don't come away thinking like, wow, these guys are chokers. It's just like, no, Mahomes remains in a different tier and was not discussed that way during the season.
We don't appreciate how rare it is, though, because like even our great quarterbacks, how rare the Mahomes part of this is, even our great quarterbacks have games where they might win, but there are significant mistakes made in it, but they overcome them. And the way that he's playing is like, I think we are past the point where game manager is an insult, but it's very like managerial in the decisions that he's making and the passes and the way that he's playing. And it's just peak like risk aversion while also not taking yourself out of the game. It's a tough thing to balance. And I don't know that we've seen it before. I'm trying to think of other quarterbacks, but I don't know.
Brady, what you're describing reminds me a lot of how I felt about Brady on some of those runs. Like they are in that tier together. That's it. I mean, it's just what he's doing is what he's consistently done is remarkable. It's the consistency. It's a million things. Okay. Well, I'm going to get into the Bills and what they got to do over the offseason. I think they're still very much, at the top of the NFL, and we'll be right back in it next year. And it's just a bummer that it had to end this way. Also, I do think Josh Allen picked up that first down. All right. Coming back, we're going to just wrap by talking about the Commanders and the Eagles. Okay, so this time you get the winner, which is the Philadelphia Eagles.
I think it's got to be Jalen Hurts as the winner. I know you're surprised by that.
They let him out of his straitjacket, Dominique.
That was ridiculous.
No, but he was awesome. I want to talk about it. Because it was really the story of the game for me.
Yeah, I think that it was just really impressive the way that he played and the decisions that he made in the passes. He still seemed somewhat like hesitant sometimes, but like he played great in this game. The thing that's always kind of hung over him, or has this season, I think, is throwing when you have to throw. But this team doesn't play like that. It's so rare that you get in a situation where he just has to drop back and sit in the pocket and pick defenses apart. And it's kind of in part because of him. So like he deserves credit for that also. But I think that like earlier in the season when he had that good game after some criticism, it just felt like a relief. I'm sure it
Yeah.
feels good to be able to put up over 200 yards and a touchdown and no turnovers and play well against the Commanders in a championship game to shut everybody up just for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good reminder of his skill set, right? And I mean, it looked a lot like the 2020 the Super Bowl
Yep.
run hurts, frankly. Just the effectiveness of their RP. By the way, this is like once again the RPO bowl between the Eagles and the Chiefs, but their RPO game was incredibly effective, which of course it made perfect sense against this Washington defense given their limitations. When Jalen threw the ball quickly, he was accurate, he was decisive, he hit on those throws outside the numbers that we think of him as hitting on. The throw to AJ Brown on the left sideline was just a
Oh yeah, that's
very
great.
like prototypical great Jalen Hurts throw, right?
Mhm.
And amazing pocket. AJ Brown, stacks him or whatever, but Hurts makes the throw. He makes it quickly. And if he plays like he did in this game, this is once again going to be a very freaking even Super Bowl, like it was last year. So I think, like, I was really heartened by it because, I don't think he played well first couple games. Obviously, he was missing throws, he was indecisive, and like you said, I saw a little bit of tentativeness early on. I think he's
Yeah.
very concerned about turning it over, but
Mhm.
you saw him hit all of the big throws that he excels
Yeah.
at, the ones that are always available to him because of the nature of this rushing attack.
Did Did you notice? And maybe it's just how he always is, but I might have been more aware of this because of his knee. But he seemed to not have a
Yeah.
burst when he was running. Like I'm not sure if that's knee
No,
related or if
I
it's
feel like
just
it's
like
been a
he's
while.
really never been a bursty type of guy.
I think before and after the injury, uh, I guess after the Super Bowl, was it? There was a turning point for him as a runner where he just stopped looking as explosive. He's still really strong and he's
Mm,
fast enough, I think, to present, make defenses either he can scramble out of empty or at least they can respect the zone read, but he's not as like when you compare him to like, Daniels across the field, who we'll get to in a second, like he just looks
right.
very different when he's running. But it was enough, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't need him to be super explosive. You just need him to be a rushing threat. Um I I am just so excited to watch this Eagles defense against Kansas City because I think they're better than they were in the Super Bowl run that one
Yeah.
year, and that's going to be a big storyline. I just want to hit on them really quickly in this game. Um, And there's such a contrast too. We talked about Kansas City and the coaching and the exotic pressures and stuff. It's such a different style of play under
Yeah.
Vic Fangio. This to me, Dominique, strikes me as like the apotheosis, I think is the word, the perfect manifestation of the Fangio defense
Yeah.
because everything they can do flows from their ability to stop the run with light boxes. In this game, the Commanders couldn't
Mm,
do anything on the ground. I think almost all their runs were into light boxes, and it was less than 3 yards per carry with Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler. And because of that, because those big dudes up front were able to, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and William Williams were so dominant, they could just pack the middle of the field, put more bodies in coverage, force Daniels to check it down outside the numbers, and then they were just choking him out on defense. Like it was just really cool to see them play the same way that they have all year, but particularly the second half of the season.
oh, yeah. That's. I mean, they have difference makers at every level, which I think is important when you have a great defense. Is like that is, and I'm sure that you're probably tired of hearing me saying this, but maybe there's someone new who hasn't understood that. Generally, I think about this as like pressure and like where you have the talent to put the pressure. And I think in the previous versions of this great Eagles defense, they had a great front, like
Yeah.
defensive front, and they would put a bunch of pressure on them to be great, which would take the pressure off the rest of the defense and make them really good. Right now, what they have is the ability to do whatever it takes, from Vaughn to their corners to their D tackles. Is like, you know what, whatever, they have an advantage somewhere, and they can play in a bunch of different ways. So that, I mean, to your point, I'm excited to see how Andy Reid thinks that he can attack this defense,
Yeah.
and how Fangio believes that he can, where he feels like he has the distinct advantage to put the pressure on the Chiefs.
Yeah, the first drive of the Commanders game, I was kind of like, "Oh, is this gonna be how it is, where the Commanders are just dinking, dunking,
Yeah.
converting 3rd and 4th downs, converting, then kicking the field goal," which was a mistake. But that's exactly how the Eagles want you to play, and I think they're gonna try everything they can to make Patrick Mahomes play that version where it's like, if you make one mistake, a drive ends. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because they're so good at limiting explosives. And that brings me to the Commanders, who again going to get into their offseason needs on Thursday. But I think my woof, and it's hard to pick a woof because this was such a magical playing with house money style run, and everything feels directionally like it's going up. But the woof, and why they lost, just talent discrepancy is what I went with. The Commanders have a quarterback. They've got a really good number one wide receiver. They've got, good defensive tackles. They just need more guys to
Yeah.
hang. And that was just very clear in this game. It was like, oh, one side is playing with like a Pro Bowl roster, and one side is still a team that is good and better than we thought, but has a bit of a ways to go in terms of surrounding that young quarterback with talent and adding to the defense, particularly the second and third levels.
Yeah. I mean, best available, just best available. Every time there's something available that's good, you go get it. You got a quarterback on a rookie deal who's playing as well as veteran quarterbacks. This is the perfect situation. But they aren't, which is funny because they aren't particularly strong at anything. Like I wouldn't be like, you know what, you're set right here. I guess the defensive tackle situation is pretty good, but yeah, if there was a great defensive tackle happened to be available, I'd get him. Like I wouldn't be out here thinking that we're set at any spot for them. They need to get best available everywhere, and I guess that's a good place to be in. You can't be wrong.
Yeah, yeah, it's they have a ton of money, I believe. Obviously, the quarterback's on a rookie
Yeah,
contract. I think my only hesitation would be thinking like the way we're talking now sounds exactly how we talked about the Houston Texans last year. Now, the Texans had unbelievable injuries, and that certainly played a role in what happened this season. But I think it's a good case study, a warning in not being overconfident in things that you thought were your strengths, perhaps. Like, for example, I think
right.
the Commanders' run game this year, you might look at that and say, wow, they ran the ball so well. We don't need to add to the offensive line. No, you do. Like I think just they got to really not rest on their laurels and think and over attribute their success this year to anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a broken record, but yeah, that's my point. It's like I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody, but this talent level normally doesn't make it to the conference championship. Like they should be behaving like a team that just missed the playoffs. Like that. That's how you should approach this offseason. Like you need to get a little bit better everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think the one final thing I'll say, just kind of to put a wrap on the season before we spin it forward, is there were things offensively with the Texans that were unsustainable. And the Packers, who are the two teams where like, everything's amazing. You got the young quarterback. You're going to be good forever. And then I was like, ooh, actually, both of those offenses were like a little bit too dependent on third down. And in the case of the Texans, you couldn't run the ball. And, you might actually, some of this turnover luck might not go your way. Both those quarterbacks, by the way, Stroud and Love, I think in retrospect, I was like, ooh, they probably got away with some throws that should have been picked last year.
Hmm.
I think that would be what I would draw in contrast to nothing Jane Daniels did this year struck me as unsustainable. So, which is, I'm not saying he's better than Stroud and Love. I'm just saying in terms of like whether or not this will be linear or will continue what we saw, I find it very unlikely that we're going to see some sort of sharp progression.
Yeah, I mean, I put on top of that to continue to double down on that is like it also didn't feel scheme dependent. Like
Yeah.
it was like simple that he
Yeah.
was just executing. It's no reason to believe that that won't continue. Or yeah, at
Yeah.
least repeat that season, which is more than good enough.
It'd be nice to see if they add more skill players too, if the passing game keeps evolving. Cause it did hit a wall a little bit in this one because I mean, the fourth screen that was busted. I was like, yeah, kind of move Terry around a little bit or something. I don't know. In any case, obviously very exciting season. Get to that more. So as I mentioned, later this week, Michael Jr. is going to be joining me to talk about the playoff teams who were eliminated, which is going to be very fun. And then the following week is the live podcast, which will be, available in audio. But if you're in Los Angeles, absolutely would love to see you there. Come shake my hand. Lenny won't be there because he can't handle crowds, but I'll be there with the guests I mentioned. It's Monday, February 3rd at the Belasco Theater. You can get tickets at minapodlive.com. 100% of proceeds go to wildfire relief here in Los Angeles. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. You can check out Domonique Foxworth on the Domonique Foxworth Show, wherever you get your podcasts, and on ESPN. Bye, bud.